All right, so I've been selling this one for a long time, probably about 4 months actually. So back in August, Stephen A. Smith, who has his own podcast, by the way, he had on Tank. Now, Tank, if you guys don't know, is a very famous, fairly famous R&B singer, four-time Grammy nominated singer. Had him on his podcast, and this interview he had with Tank on his show, really stemmed from a conversation these two guys had. I guess night before they were hanging out for dinner or whatever it may be. And they got into a big discussion about two different things. Obviously, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, and who's better, blah, 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 and this and that. And then these two guys, that went from that to a conversation about Chris Brown and Michael Jackson, and basically who's better, who's greater, all that kind of stuff. And Tank, who has worked with Chris Brown in the past, actually, had some very bold comments about
I
where he
ran
stands.
into him a few
Oh,
days
sorry about that. Bold comments about where he stands on the argument between
ago.
the two. Here's the conversation. I'm going to play the conversation. We're going to react to it about where he stands on the MJ Chris Brown conversation here.
And the blasphemy that came out of this man's mouth is the reason that I had to bring him on this show today. I'm talking about the man himself, the one and only Tank is in the house. What's up, big time? How you doing, man?
Did you say blasphemy?
I got that.
Sure
That's the
did.
word that came to my mind.
Oh, that's a little too slow. Little too slow.
Listen, let me get the audience the background, bro. So I'm in Miami a few days ago. I'm hanging out with my crew at Prime 112. We leave the restaurant. I see my man there in the corner, huddled in the corner, eat with his boys and stuff, eat dinner. And for some reason, we got into it. And tell the audience what you said that almost gave me a heart attack right in the restaurant. Tell them, Tank. Tell them.
I mean, what I said was, I think that if we're saying numbers don't lie, me and my brother Breon said that LeBron is the GOAT. But that's all I said.
Right, LeBron, you didn't say something. What did you say about Chris Brown compared to Michael Jackson?
And now we'll move on to that.
Go ahead.
Chris Brown is, in fact, better than Michael Jackson.
What?
Real quick. So you watch his face there, Tank's face there. Like, it sounds like you look at him like, and you think, like, this dude, like, I don't think he believes what he's saying, actually. Like, he knows he's going to hot take. Some of these hot take artists, and that's a thing now in this media industry, whether it's sports or politics or culture, it doesn't matter. And you see his face, the setup. You can tell that he's saying something. He knows that I'm going to say it. I know I'm going to get some blowback for this one, and folks may or may not believe it, and this and that. But his face was kind of a tell. Now, look, he's a little bit biased too, also, because Chris Brown and him have worked together in the past. But he says Chris Brown's been Michael Jackson. So his rest of the interview.
Do you understand what you're saying? Tank, do you understand what you're saying, my man? I mean, you're admired, you're revered, you're associated with music, my brother. Everybody loves and respects you. We know that Chris Brown is out of this world. I think he's the greatest entertainer on the planet right now, personally. I think Chris Brown is special.
I agree with that for the record. Now, I've said, in terms of entertainers today that are alive, in terms of live, I think it's a three-person race. I think it's Chris Brown, I think it's Bruno Mars, I think it's Beyonce. I think those three are, I would say, neck and neck for the crown of best overall entertainer alive. Now, obviously, ask me who's the greatest entertainer of all time. In my opinion, all time, I go Michael, obviously, but I'm also a bit biased there as well too. But it's neither here there. But most people actually agree with my sentiment.
But better than Michael Jackson, 13-time Grammy Award winner. Michael Jackson, the Thriller, the highest selling album of all time. That Michael Jackson.
Things evolve, my brother. Things evolve. There was, if we're equating it to sports as we love to do, if there was Magic Johnson, now there is LeBron James. That is the ultimate evolution of a man who can play all five positions and fill up that stat sheet honestly, organically, right? And now as we talk about Chris Brown, we're talking about the evolution of Michael Jackson, the evolution of Usher, the evolution of me, the evolution of Genuine. That is what this kid is, a singer, songwriter, producer, performer who orchestrates it all, from video to stage to songs to fashion He's the
Fashion.
evolution.
You brought up fashion. We're not going there. I'm not going to get into the fashion part. I'm not debating that. I'm certainly not going to sit there. I mean, Michael Jackson came out sometime looking like Captain Crunch. I'm not going to sit up there and say, Michael Jackson is fashion. I'm not going to do that. And
see, that's the thing. Also, the fashion part too is also funny, interesting because, like, and look, I don't fancy Chris Brown. He may have an influence on fashion to some degree, but nowhere to the effect that Michael Jackson had with the white socks, the black, the gloves, some of the outfits he wore too. Also to this day, it's modeled on model show on runway shows to this day. The Michael Jackson stuff that he wore or influences he wore. See, one of the things I always say about Michael Jackson, why he's so big, is not just the music; it's everything else. It's the culture. So yeah, I mean, the fashion thing, Michael has that in spades. That's not even a conversation.
Love Michael Jackson, God rest his soul, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just saying, when we talk about the ability to perform, I'll give you this. As great, as phenomenal as Michael Jackson was as a dancer, I can't say that I've ever seen anybody that dances better than Chris Brown. I'll give you that.
Let's check the list.
Let's do it.
Just go down the list.
Let's go down the list. Go ahead.
Who's the better singer?
I would say Michael Jackson. What do
you
better singer, Michael Jackson, not even close. And I'm gonna be honest with you. Better vocalist. Michael Jackson has 45 years of material to use as example. The fact his voice changed, and yet Michael Jackson's the thing. I think the one thing about Michael Jackson's art, which is kind of crazy if you think about it, because he did so many great things as an artist. His vocals actually was one of the most underrated parts of his ability, which is funny because he's known as a dancer and this and that and an entertainer. But his vocals, like his raw vocals, and this goes back to him as 5 years old into the Jackson 5. Even when his voice started changing in the mid 70s, he was still a top-notch singer. And then, of course, that all evolved. And also, you gotta remember too, also, we look at Chris Brown, Michael Jackson, the diversity of what they did, like musically speaking. Like Chris Brown is pretty much a pop R&B singer, maybe even so much pop. Michael Jackson did so many styles of music, within his own catalog, with not just R&B, but pop music, and there's even a country song he had on a Jackson's record on the Victory album. He's also done I say rock with Dirty Diana, Beat It, Give It to Me, you name it. He's done opera, he's done classical music also too. So not just the fact that Michael Jackson is a better vocalist than Chris Brown, he's a more diverse vocalist than Chris Brown. So right off there, Michael Jackson has that in spades.
Don't you do it. Don't do it.
Why would I say that Chris Brown's a better singer than Michael Jackson?
Don't hold on.
Michael Jackson.
The 70s. Don't hold on to that. Don't hold on to that.
Well, no, you can't say hold on to that because again, that's part of the discussion. Like if you're having conversations about who's better, you have to use the entire catalog. You can't just say, well, we'll only use this part of his career. No, that's not how it works. If you're making a statement that Chris Brown is better than Michael Jackson, okay, you can't just use a fake statement and say, oh, well, we can't use the early part of his career because it was different. No. That's not how it works, brother. You can't have both ways, okay? If you're making a statement that say Chris Brown's better than Michael Jackson, you need to put up Chris Brown's entire catalog and Chris Brown's entire whatever he's done, his entire career versus Michael Jackson's career and his catalog. That's simple.
Who's the better songwriter?
Michael Jackson. Wait, how
can you do this, Steven?
Who are you talking about? Michael Jackson? Michael Jackson is not better than Chris Brown as a songwriter?
Most of Michael Jackson's hits were not produced or written by him.
Well, that's false. That's false, and that's easy debunked. Michael Jackson's biggest song was written by him, Billie Jean. Don't Stop to Get Enough, written by Michael Jackson. It's just the hits, for crying out loud, the hits. Bad, Michael Jackson wrote that song. The Way You Make Me Feel, Michael Jackson wrote that song. Dirty Diana, Michael Jackson wrote that song. Smooth Criminal, Michael Jackson wrote that song. I Just Can't Stop Loving You, Michael Jackson wrote that song. I'm going on a list of songs. I mean, this is the hits. Man and Mirror was written by Saida Garrett, so that's the count. Remember the Time, Michael Jackson wrote that song. A Scream, Michael Jackson wrote that song. I mean, you're sitting there making a statement like, oh, he was his written by, but was not by him. No, that's false. That's false. I mean, no. What are we doing here? What are we starting something? Michael Jackson wrote that song. Like, what are we doing? The Girl's Mind with Paul McCartney. He wrote that song. Michael Jackson wrote that song as well. Like, what are we doing? Beat It, Michael Jackson wrote that song. Like look, Tank. I don't know what you're trying to do here. Like I don't know. Look, I know Chris Brown's your boy and all, but like let's be real here. Let's be real. Okay, use facts, not feelings on this, please.
See, you know that level of expertise. I can't challenge. I'm talking about what I listen to, man. I ain't getting no technical like that, Tank. I didn't know that.
Okay, now,
by the way, Earth Song, also by Michael Jackson too. Earth Song is one of his biggest hits in Europe, for the record.
I didn't know that.
Let's go here. Who's the better dancer?
Chris Brown. I can't say that. I can never say somebody a better dancer than Chris Brown. That brother's sensational.
I have to. Okay, so that I'm gonna agree with Stephen A on that one. Not that Michael wasn't a great dancer, but I think Chris Brown, watching the stuff he does as a dancer, he has a little more in his toolbox than Michael did. As a dancer, I mean, a lot of what Chris Brown does is like acrobatic stuff, and some may say like almost aerobics in a sense, but whatever you want to call that. But Chris Brown can actually do more moves and move in ways that Michael never showed actually in his career than Michael. What I will say though is Michael is the bigger package than Chris Brown. But we'll continue more with this conversation.
Without question.
What I want you to do is I have homework for you. I want you to go look at credits of songwriters and of these songs that are hits for both artists.
Okay.
Some of the biggest songs in the world.
Okay.
And see whose names you find. Chris Brown is not just putting his name on records because he's Chris Brown. He's putting his names on records because he's writing and producing those records.
Okay. See, you get
this is the problem. So there are, and maybe it's just me being a little more. Because look, I like Chris Brown. I think Chris Brown is the most entertaining, probably arguably greatest entertainer today living. Chris Brown, though, and someone like myself who is pretty music astute across different genres, rather. Chris Brown doesn't have has to have many memorable songs in ways that affects counterculture that goes beyond just his genre. There aren't many songs that, let's say I was a country music fan, for example. I don't know any Chris Brown music, most likely, but I know Michael Jackson's music. There aren't any songs that written by Chris Brown that has infiltrated other cultures in that way. There's not. Now, within the genre he performs in, I agree with that. But in terms of songs that affected generations upon generations that to this day still has impact that he wrote, no, he doesn't have that. I'm sorry. That's an impact. That's when it comes to data in an impact conversation. Okay, if we're talking about talent versus impact, there's two different arguments there. You know, Michael Jackson also wrote "We Are the World." I mean, him and Lionel Richie wrote together, but it's been said that Michael Jackson wrote 90% of that song. Okay, "We Are the World" is one of the biggest singles in history of music. You know, that song had a lot of, you know, was actually largely responsible for helping curb some of the starvation and poverty in Africa. Michael wrote that song. There was not even remotely a song on the level of "We Are the World" that Chris Brown has, and that's not even on Michael's catalog, for the record.
Get slick there. See, that ain't what you said to me when we were there that night. When we were hanging out at prom, that ain't what you said. We were talking about the music the average fan hears, the entertainment they provide, singing and dancing. That's what we were talking about. You didn't tell me to look up no credits that day.
I am behind the veil, my brother.
You are. I know that.
I get to see things that most people don't get to see.
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I get to understand nuance.
Okay.
Now, people who are just going straight off entertainment, yes, they had to beat a jacket. Yes, they had the Thriller. It was a movement. It is still a movement to this day. Michael Jackson is forever. Let me just say that. Okay. There's no Michael Jackson disrespect or hate ever. Right. Michael Jackson is forever because Michael Jackson is the blueprint by which every artist is trying to aspire to be. He is the blueprint, the quintessential example of everything you want to be as an artist.
Okay.
And then there comes someone who gets it right and takes it to another level.
But that's where you lose me. That's where you lose me. When you say Chris Brown has taken it to another level, okay, I'm thinking about Thriller. I'm thinking about Pretty Young Thing. I'm thinking about You Rock My World. I'm thinking about You Remember the Time. I'm thinking about all of these Michael Jackson great songs. I ain't even talking about the Jackson 5, okay, when he was a kid. Right? I'm talking about thereafter, when the solo career. I'm like, when you say take it to another level, I respect the hell out of Chris Brown. He's phenomenal. But how did he take it to another level from that level I just described about Michael Jackson?
Think about this. Michael Jackson went from child star to adult star.
Okay.
He accumulated all of those fans in a span of 20-something years. Like, they got to grow with it.
Okay.
Chris Brown started at 15.
Yeah.
At 15. And has accumulated the same worldwide response. We're not, and it was
no that is diabolically false, and you're actually putting Chris Brown in a bad position here too also, because there is probably no one, certainly in my lifetime and 44 years of living on this planet, who was as famous as Michael Jackson was, and still is to some degree, even 15 years into the grave, to this day. You're actually doing Chris Brown a disservice, because Michael Jackson is famous in ways that I don't think even Tank, who's someone that he says that behind the veil, he's behind the veil. I don't think he also has an idea just how famous Michael Jackson is beyond just United States of America. Like, Michael Jackson is literally, like, there are people living in countries, in Russia and whatnot, third world countries, that have never seen snow. They know what snow was. There's a video, actually, an Amazon video out there, a video out there where, like, some tribe in Amazon did not know what snow was. They were showing the video. What this is? They had no idea what it was. They saw it was snow. But then they played a clip of Michael Jackson. And by the way, a clip of Michael Jackson not in his peak. He was performing the song "Scream" on the History Tour, which actually was not even in his peak. And right away the entire tribe knew who he was. So if you're talking about fame, that's not even a conversation. Like, you're really doing Chris Brown a disservice by saying that. So no, that is diabolically false by Tank there.
crazy. We're not even living in the age of superstars anymore. You know why? Because everything is reality. Everything is something you can see every day. You can go on Chris Brown's page and you can see him interacting. You can see him talking and dancing and having a good time. You could never see that with Michael Jackson. You can never see that with Whitney Houston. You can never see that with our old superstars, and that gave them the advantage of being superstars. That gave them the advantage that when they showed up, the frenzy was out of control because you never knew if you were going to see them again. We live in an age where superstars are obsolete because we see everything that they do. We're able to judge everything that they do. We're able to critique them going to the bathroom or eating their food at their favorite restaurant. In a land where superstars are obsolete, Chris Brown is a superstar.
So he's definitely a star. That's no question. A superstar definitely in this era. But again, this is where I think the separation really between the two artists are. If you're saying Chris Brown is better than Michael Jackson, or bigger Michael Jackson for that matter, what you're telling me is he is on level with the Beatles. Because I've always said that we have had in this country, in this world, probably 3 music phenomenons in that we've ever seen. It's sort of my lifetime, or close to my lifetime. The Beatles is one, obviously. Elvis Presley is the other one, and Michael Jackson's the third. So if you're saying Chris Brown is on level or not better than Michael Jackson, what you're telling me is that Chris Brown is also on level with the Beatles, on level with Elvis Presley in terms of impact, in terms of, I mean, whether or not you agree that he's a better artist than the other 2 or 3, that's an opinion, obviously. But because again, that's the level Michael's at. Michael's at that level. Michael is at the level where it's Michael and he's 1-on-1. And that's not even the case. I'm not even sure Chris Brown is the biggest artist of his own generation, much less all time. So that's why I think this take by Tank is ludicrous. But I think the take also is dependent on what you're saying, because there's 2 different sides of the argument. There's the talent portion of it, who's better, who has more than 2 bucks than the artist, and then who has made a bigger impact.
Doing arenas and stadiums all around the world. He is one of one. And listen,
I agree with that.
Michael's been doing that since he was a child. Michael's was doing stadiums, selling out stadiums on a regular. Like, arenas are too small for Michael Jackson internationally. I mean, the dude prior to last year held the record for the most sellouts in one week or 2 week sitting at Wembley Stadium on the Bat Tour. Like, what are we doing? Like, Chris Brown is, again, big, but and maybe I'm wrong here, but I don't see the same impact of Chris Brown outside of the United States. Not even close to the conversation with Michael Jackson. Not even close.
I agree with that. He's the greatest. Listen, I love Bruno Mars. I didn't pay any attention to Bruno Mars until I saw Bruno Mars perform at the Super Bowl, by himself. It was before he did it with Beyonce and Coldplay. It was the one before that when Denver got annihilated by the Seattle Seahawks and Bruno Mars, if I remember, and Bruno Mars put on the show. But when I saw Chris Brown perform, he's the best in the world right now. The best in the world, one of one. I'm just challenging the next level. Like, I didn't know there was a next level after Michael Jackson. But you do make a good point. We didn't see Michael Jackson. We see everything about Chris Brown. So do you believe, because I'm sure as much of a superstar as Chris Brown is, you would never say that Chris Brown's popularity equates to what Michael Jackson's was. You wouldn't say that, would you? Oh, come on, come on, man. Come on, man.
Here's the thing. I have to give the edge to Michael Jackson in that regard because Michael didn't come up in social media era. So it wasn't a push of one button that could connect you to the entire world. Okay. Michael had to connect to the entire world 100% organically, the old school way, door to door.
And to me, by him saying that only proves what I'm saying here, that Michael Jackson is still greater than Chris Brown. Because Mike, in the day and age today, and it's funny, I was having a conversation with my friend of mine about this today, about the fact is that, in fact, you can just, get your music on the phone. Like for example, last week, Kendrick Lamar's album dropped last week. And all I had to do was just open my phone, press the button, and play the entire album because I have subscribed to Apple Music. Whereas in my heyday, and I'm not saying I'm really old, but I'm older, you had to, if you wanted an artist's album, you wanted a Michael Jackson album or any other artist's album, you had to literally walk into the record store, find the record. Hopefully it didn't sell out, first off. Find the record, buy the record, open the record, put it into your CD or put it into your record player or your cassette and play it. And then you had to hope that many people were buying your records too on top of that. See, it's harder to be, I think it's harder to have the impact back then. Now, his argument about superstars being made back then because of the accessibility, yes, I agree with Tank on that. But I would still argue that what Michael did without social media, and certainly he's doing even today from the grave with social media, proves that the greatness of Michael Jackson in comparison to Chris Brown. And again, not knocking Chris Brown, because you're not. But I don't think we ever consider Chris Brown at any point in his career the biggest artist on the planet. He's not right now, because Taylor Swift is bigger artist, bigger than he is right now. So what are we doing here?
And Brown has the advantage of having social media where he can push a button and he's in 100, 200 million homes at the drop of a dime, right? So as Michael Jackson is absolutely world renowned, and everywhere you go, everybody knows Michael Jackson for sure. I can't debate that. But everywhere you go, everybody knows Chris Brown too.
Let me ask you this question.
No, again, they do, but they don't. And I mean, I'm friends with people who are older than I am, and and I'll bring Chris Brown. They have no idea who he is. I mean, it's not even fair because of the generations. But I know people who are not even 10 years old that know who Michael Jackson is and know his music. Unless you are forced Chris Brown, unless you're a Chris Brown fan, you don't know who Chris Brown is. Again, I think Chris Brown's success is more isolated because of the genre he does. And again, I don't think Chris Brown has the impact beyond R&B and pop music in comparison. Again, Chris Brown has never been considered the biggest artist of his generation at any point in his career. At any point in his career, even now, he's probably the biggest artist, the biggest entertainer of his genre. I'll give you that. But Michael Jackson was considered the biggest artist of his generation and other generations, and is still considered one of the greatest artists of all time, period, to this day.
In all seriousness, because I'm a Michael Jackson guy, but I'm a Chris Brown guy too, because the brother's phenomenal. Let me ask you this. Is there something that you think Chris Brown could do to be more popular? Is there something that he's not doing? I mean, of all the marvelous things that you've highlighted, he's already done. Is there anything that he's avoided or hasn't done yet, in your estimation?
I don't think that there is. I don't think there's a thing of more popular when you're doing stadiums all around the world. In terms of accomplishments, if you're asking me personally what I would like to see him do,
Okay.
I would love for Chris Brown to star in his own blockbuster movie. I believe Chris Brown, the actor, is the final piece in this entire thing. That's just,
you know, I don't just.
Okay, so with that, so Michael did do a movie. He did The Wiz back in 1978. It was a hit. The film flopped in a sense in comparison to what was hyped at the time, but in hindsight, it has become a cult classic, and Michael did that. And that's the one thing I will say what Michael doesn't really have is he was someone that wanted to do movies and stuff. He had always wanted to do movies, even after Thriller, and it never came to pass. That Chris Brown could have an advantage on if he decides to go to movies. What can Chris Brown do to become more popular? And Tank's point about stadiums is a point. The thing that Michael has still to this day, and he had especially in his heyday, is the story. There's a narrative. Michael Jackson has a story that everyone's attached to. From Gary, Indiana, he's from Gary, Indiana, 6 brothers, 3 sisters, living in a 2-bedroom house. Gary, Indiana, the poorest city in the country, still to this day. Black family, mixed to California, age 9, becomes one of the biggest stars on the planet from the word go. Beats the Beatles records out the gate, you know. And then he gets older. There's obviously a crossroads of his career at the time. Then him and Quincy Jones make Off the Wall together, and from there everything changes. Then Thriller comes out, and Thriller's the biggest selling album of all time, and that changed everything. Of course, the controversies and the Michael Jackson's story is so fascinating. Even if you weren't a fan of Michael Jackson, you still are fascinated by the story. To this day, 15 years later, they're making musicals about the guy. Okay, there's a movie come out next year about him. There's documentaries to this day, negative and positive, about Michael Jackson. To me, that's the impact. Like, if people love and hate you, that's the impact. But again, be more famous. I don't think we're ever going to see someone as famous as Michael Jackson again, because I just think that there's the narrative, the story of success coming from Gary Indiana to the tragedy to the end of his career and his life. The international impact also too, especially. And look, I'm not saying this from a biased perspective. I'm saying this because I'm pretty knowledgeable about Michael Jackson's career and his life. I'm actually I'm extremely knowledgeable about his career and his life, to this day. And again, it's not a knock on Chris Brown, because Chris Brown is phenomenal what he does. But again, if we're having a conversation about better, okay, I hear that conversation. Who's better? Who has more tools in the toolbox? Although there are things I would say Michael still does better than Chris Brown. You want to say Chris Brown's better dancer? Go right ahead. But I still put Michael as a better songwriter. Put Michael as a better actual vocalist. All around entertainer. We can have a conversation too as well too. But if we talk about impact, there's the better conversation about who's better at the tools, and there's who's the greater part. And who's greater? It's not even close. It's Michael Jackson. It's not even close.
I don't dismiss that. I've seen him in a couple of movies. He's got to. I'm talking about as an actor, because we know as a musician what he is. But as an actor, yeah, I believe in Chris Brown. I like that. You know what? Go ahead.
Got it. And if he does that, we cancel Christmas. Cancel Christmas. Chris Brown in a blockbuster, Fast and Furious, whatever it is, whatever you want to put. You put Chris Brown as the focal point, the headline, the star of that movie.
Okay. Let me transition, because now let me get to my wheelhouse. Like you said, you're behind the veil. Okay, so I got that.
So there you go. So yeah, I mean, look, I get the argument he made there. It's not I won't say it's a terrible argument, because again, there's certain things that he said there where, okay, again, if you go line by line about things he can and can't do and all that, I can see his argument about Chris Brown being, probably a better, dancer and this and that. But again, if you're having a conversation about who's a better artist versus who's a greater artist, that's two different conversations. Who's made more impact into artists? It's not even close. It's Michael Jackson. It's not even a conversation. Okay. Again, there are artists like Celine Dion who literally learned English because she wanted to meet Michael Jackson, because of his music. It's because Michael Jackson didn't learn English. That's the impact he had and still has to this day. There are people who will literally, their whole exposure to black culture, exposure to America outside this country, from out in Russia and other third world countries, that Michael Jackson is their first exposure to the West. Again, that's what you're going up against. And that's why I always say it's unfair to compare the two artists. Now, if you want to have a conversation about the discographies and who dances better, who sings better, then okay, I can see the argument there to some degree, but there's the better argument about the artistry, which I still take Michael anyway, and then there's the argument about who's greater. And Michael Jackson is, in my opinion, and I think most people agree with this also, that there is really no other artist really on level with Michael Jackson in terms of what he has accomplished and what the impact he has and had and continues to have 15 years in the grave. So anyway, that's my today's Unfiltered. Till next one.